Hello my compadres and welcome back to the RimWorld Restart on Death series. My friends, it's ever so good to see you back here today. Today we're starting off a bit hot and heavy with some great news. Omar has been recruited into our ranks. Omar, of course, being a cultist that had attacked us in the last episode with a really high resistance, and we finally managed to win him over. In today's episode, we're also going to be starting off by mining some of the more rare resources of the region, such as tin, zinc, and copper. The reason being, these resources were going to be absolutely vital to a brand new project, a steam-powered smithy. Actually, an entire smith shop, as it just so happens. Now, our brand new steam forge inside this smithing shop is going to allow us to create pistons. Pistons are used in many a different type of steam technology, such as a steam-powered power suit. But you may notice they require a crafting of 8, something that Ori, our best crafter, does not currently have, as he only has a crafting of 6. So either we work on that or capture somebody with a higher crafting skill, which sounds like a lot more fun to me. In the meantime, however, I'm going to be attempting to make friends with some of our neighbors, and to do so, we're going to be loading up plenty of weapons and other items into our ox cart to take to them. Unfortunately though, as we were doing so, we were notified of a Mech Cluster with a weather controller in the area. Now, it wasn't all that far from the base, but I didn't have enough time to deal with it right now, as we really need to go out and make some friends. So we're going to deal with it later, and we'll also have to put up with the rainy thunderstorm. Just for right now though. We are going to be heading out though to offer some gifts to the Black Shogun clan. There seem to be 3 clans on the planet of Black, Blue, and Red, but the Black is the closest to us and also the closest to becoming neutral with us. As a gesture of good faith, we would offer up many a resource like components and different types of leathers, as well as plenty of weapons, and this significantly helped us out. But another reason that I chose the Black Shogun clan to make peace with is because they also had some peace talks in the area, in the mountains here, so that'll help us out quite a bit as well. While Laz is out on his journey for peace though, back home we ended up having a man-hunting pack of tortoise enter the area. These disgusting, monstrous beasts were coming right for our colony, with complete disregard for any living life form. It was like fighting a horde of unfeeling, demonic beasts. I'm afraid, my friends, today is the tortoise takeover, and we will be making our last stand against them. At least Laz won't be here to die as well, so we won't have to restart the series again. I'm joking, of course. Did you really think I was serious? It was just a little group of turtles. The only thing these little bastards will be taking over are our taste buds from the inside of a soup bowl. All that turtle soup should help propel our brains in our extensive research that we just finished into clockwork turrets, our very first turrets of this series. We would go ahead and begin building some slate embrasures on the inside of our walls just next to our traps, where we would also end up building our clockwork turrets. We would also go ahead and begin building 2 more on the other walls as well. Now, the best thing about these clockwork turrets is they don't actually require electricity or even steam for that matter to be powered, meaning that they are ready 24/7, 365, or whatever kind of year calendar this planet has. Now, by this point, the peace talks were over and Laz was on his way back home. Thankfully, everything went very good. Not only did Laz get a significant boost to his social skill, but we are now neutral with the Black Clan. As Laz was making his way back home though, we would begin to try and tame one of these massive terrarium creatures, and our first attempt was a complete failure, but after some time we would eventually manage to tame one. A handsome fella that I'm sure you fine folks have a great name for. It would also seem that we're able to use the creature's biology to grow different types of vegetation, though I think we'll have to unlock them first. Either way, I think it'll make a fine mount to ride into battle on. We would end up building a pin for the big fella, but after putting him in there, it doesn't seem like it works at all, and we would have to use walls to keep him in, so we'll just keep him tied to the ground for now. In other good news though, it would seem that Jiraiya has proposed to Harry, and the 2 of them are now engaged. Young samurai love. As a celebration of their engagement, and also because I am sick and tired of the noise of these thunderstorms, we're actually going to travel to the weather controller and destroy it. Luckily for us, it seems that all the mechs are recharging their batteries, so we can sneak up and deconstruct this wall and then start bashing in the weather controller with a sword. With a shot from Omar's rifle, it was destroyed, the mechs were none the wiser, and we could finally begin heading back home. That was actually quite a bit easier than I thought it would be. Laz would end up beating us back home though, from his peaceful, long trade mission. One could almost call the mission a bit boring as well, with Laz being the one guy that we don't need dying in this series, series. I kinda thought it'd be cool if he got ambushed, but oh well. The others would end up arriving back at Flowing Hill shortly thereafter. After they had returned, we also finished up some research into alchemy, which unlocks quite a few things, but it's mostly a prerequisite tech. Now that we have that under our belt though, I wanted to focus on something a bit different, some proper samurai armor. We already have a bit of knowledge into this research, so it shouldn't take too long, but while we're waiting, we're going to work on some other projects, such as a hot air balloon. Our incredibly slow, but also first aerial vehicle of this series. We're going to let Throb here take it out on its maiden voyage. Now I know what you're thinking, but Rat Daddy Throb is completely blind and doesn't have any eyes. Yeah, I'm sure she'll do fine. The reason that I built the hot air balloon is because we are surrounded by many an enemy, and I thought this might be a pretty good way to transport some very small yet valuable items to our allies. This way we can avoid ambushes completely. Since we're still working on improving Ori's crafting skill, I thought if we're going to do that, we might as well make some interesting items. I introduce to you, my friends, the Steamwork Pepper Box Pistols. Some fairly primitive firearms compared to the tech that we've seen the space mercenaries using, but it should be enough to help us defend ourselves. Finally, after learning more about samurai armor, we completed the research, and we would also have Ori begin working on several samurai helmets as well as the armor itself to once again increase the crafting skill and also get everybody some better armor. I was really happy with how it turned out, though I think I'd like to grow some dye so that we could change the colors and perhaps even make our own color-coded clan. Looks like it'll be in a hot moment though, as we have a color-coded clan, the Red Clan in this case, coming to attack us. Interestingly enough, it would also seem that the Red Clan have been producing some primitive firearms of their own, some type of long rifle. I think it'll be in our best interest to steer clear of the wrong end of those. As the invaders would approach our village, we were firing from the comfort and safety of the inside of our embrasures. They may have well outnumbered us, but we were using superior technology. On the other hand though, they had sappers among their ranks, and they would begin mining through the hill to try and enter our village and catch us by surprise. Well, quite frankly, I hate surprises, so we decided to come out from the comfort and safety of our embrasures and try to sneak up while they're pinned in this little hole in the mountain here and fire at them, trapped just like fish in a barrel. They basically signed their own death warrant like a bunch of fools. They began trying to flee the area after seeing many of their friends torn apart by Throb's psychic abilities and blasted into oblivion by our plasma rifles. There were a few of them left behind, but their skill sets weren't all that great, so we didn't really care about them, and we would simply strip them for their armor. Speaking of which, we would also confiscate these rifles. You never know when you might need a good long rifle to do some dirty work. Given the frequency of attacks lately, I thought it might be a good investment to go ahead and replace our northern wooden wall with some slate on the outside as well, just as we had for our western wall. Attacks don't seem to be all that frequent from the north, but just as with most things, they happen when you least expect them. Now by this point, Ori had finally gotten his crafting skill up to an 8, meaning that we could make brass pistons, and with those pistons we could also make a steam research bench, which is indeed a required facility to begin researching farther and farther into the steampunk technologies such as Steamwork rifles, which is our current project. We would also unlock steam-powered tools as well, which will help us with mining and construction, just as we've seen with Laz's Steamwork hammer. I also want to mention that we've planted some dyes, and once we have these harvested, we'll actually be able to change the color of our armor, as we talked about earlier. We would then get to witness the beautiful marriage ceremony between Harry and Juriah. As is customary on this planet, the two of them would say their vows and hold their hands, and they were now one. And we could now celebrate with some good food and even better sake. Now, I've been thinking about it, and something I would really like around the base are some more people, and one way we can go about doing that is going to a nearby logging site, beating some people down, and taking them as prisoners. We're going to be sending Omar because of his rifle skill. Hopefully he doesn't end up killing someone though, and we're going to be sending Laz because, one, I'm playing a bit fast and loose, otherwise there wouldn't be that much fun, and because because he has a big hammer to bonk them on the head with, taking the hot air balloon to avoid any horse carriage traffic, of course. Another great advantage to using the air balloon for these types of attacks is that not only can we avoid ambushes, and it is much faster to just simply fly over, but we're also quite stealthy, which is really sticking with who we are as a clan. Stealth kinda went out the window though when Omar was spotted and he began unleashing hellfire from his rifle. We had really hoped to try and take as many of them prisoner as possible, but I mean, yeah. Thankfully though, we did have one of the loggers left, but she was trying to get away from us. Omar was able to get ahead of her and absolutely body her, taking her to the ground where we could try to subdue her and begin tending to her wounds. Looks like we've made a friend after all. We would also scour the camp for anything useful, but we really only found some wood and pemmican, which is better than nothing, I guess. Some time later, and we had finally returned home, where we would throw our new friend known as Tha in the prison, where we could begin recruiting her. Out of all three of the loggers, I had checked their skill sets, and she actually had the worst out of them all, but it's still not too bad, with her being mediocre at most things. Either way, her fire breath ability would be pretty useful. A little bit of time later, and our couple of fields of dye had finally grown to maturity so that we could harvest it. With that, we would go ahead and utilize the dye to dye the armors and apparel of our samurai. As we were doing so, Jiraiya had managed to finish up his research into steamwork weapons, allowing us to harness the power of steam for more violent purposes. We would waste no time in having Ori go ahead and build us a steamwork rifle. He would complete it shortly thereafter. Now, I am going to level with you, this rifle may look a little bit silly compared to your average firearm. And also because it uses steam as a propellant for the bullet, it is a bit weaker than your standard gunpowder and or black powder propelled weapon. For a good comparison of this, I've decided to compare it to the matchlock weapons that we saw the other clans utilizing. And yes, as you can see, the damage is about half that of a matchlock weapon, however, it is much more accurate in medium to short range. Now by this point we had finally dyed all the armor and apparel of all of our samurai. We're going to be going with a purple color for our clan, minus Laz. Personally, I think the purple is a good contrast from the other three clans of red, black, and blue. It kinda sets us apart. Even more so is the fact that the purple clan shall be led by the Crimson Warrior, the old one-eyed samurai himself. Later on that night though, it would seem that we have yet another attack by the space mercenaries and they're coming right for us. There were indeed several of them, but many of them didn't have the same samurai apparel that we had become accustomed to. It would seem that not all of the mercenaries had taken up with the culture of the planet, but one thing was for sure, they were all extremely dangerous. As they approached our base, we prepared for a battle of epic proportions. However, our large bulbous mega terrarium creature was left outside the village walls and Ori would rush to mount it to try and get away, but he was shot quickly off its back. It would seem that we now have to rescue both of them. Luckily, a trade caravan from the Blue clan was here to try and assist us in our endeavors of protecting ourselves, though they were basically cannon fodder against the charged weapons of the pirates. But given the circumstances, they were putting up one hell of a fight, so much so that the mercenaries decided to try and run away while trying to kidnap who they could before doing so. Luckily, we had already rushed to Ori by this point, so he was safe and sound. We just needed to get away from the mercenaries as they were retreating and firing at us. Yes indeed, faced against overwhelming odds, the mercenaries have decided to run away, but something tells me this is definitely not the last time we'll see them again. Many an ally was lost here today on this battlefield from the Blue clan, and their sacrifice is greatly appreciated. There really wasn't much of a way for us to repay them, but we would take in one of their injured members and try to nurse him back to health at the very least. Thankfully, Ori was safe and sound as well. We had managed to get to him just in time. Another hour or two out here on his own and he definitely would have bled out. He and the Blue clan soldier definitely have a long road to recovery ahead. It would also seem upon further inspection that he has lost his left eye. Just as well as his left leg. He's lucky he's not just a torso lying around on the ground as many times as he got hit by that charge rifle. So it could have been worse, I guess. The severity of his wounds did make me realize, however, that at the very least we needed something of a makeshift hospital. So naturally we threw one together. This little makeshift hospital actually has its very own portable generator, that way in case something happens with the main grid we can still keep power going in here. We also have a handful of hospital beds, but more importantly we also have 4 operating tables in their own rooms. On the outside of the little hospital I made something of a nice little nature sanctuary that, it could use some work, I won't lie. But touching back on the operating tables, the reason I built those separate rooms on their own in the hospital is so that we could actually perform some surgeries. I had planned on making a clockwork leg as it doesn't require that many resources. But those of you with a keen eye probably do notice the fact that it requires a crafting of tin, something that none of our people have. And yet again, we have been bested by a crafting ceiling. But I refuse to continue empty-handed, so for the time being, at the very least, we're going to be giving Laz here a peg leg for his right leg. I was considering waiting on the clockwork leg before we perform surgery on Ori, simply because everyone's medical skills are very low and I really don't want to mess up. Now, I ended up doing something a little bit controversial. I have actually added a mod to the mod list, which is the Rimhammer Steam Tank, as I feel that it is very fitting with our technology and the theme for this series. Now, I definitely don't plan on adding or removing mods very often, as I do want the mod list to be quite random, but if I find one like this that I feel really fits with the theme and stuff like that a few episodes in, we'll most likely end up adding it, and the same goes if we have some that are causing issues, I'll have to remove them, but that's the only time. Another reason I was okay with adding this mod is because these steam tanks can actually simply be built after researching smithing, and really that didn't feel all that fair to me, so now that we've really progressed into steamwork technology, it feels fair. As you can imagine, the parts that go into a very complex machine such as this require their own special workbench known as an engineering bench, allowing us to make all the parts that are required. However, they do require many resources, and by this point we've all but depleted our supply of steel and components. Now, luckily we did have plenty of starship chunks to deconstruct, plenty of compacted machinery and steel, as well as some old runes made out of the same. And I think this should be just enough resources to build one singular steam tank, which is really all we want, just so we can test it out. Now, while Ori's working on our steam tank parts, we're going to be sending Laz out once more on the ox cart to do a little bit of trading with the Black Clan. As you well know, since Ori has really been trying to progress his crafting skill, we have a lot of weapons that he's been making, so we would end up selling those to them before heading back home. However, shortly there before we would arrive back in town, we actually had enough parts to create our very first steam tank. Something really cool and also really useful about the steam tank is that it actually uses wood as fuel, which would make sense. Now, I had hoped that I would also be able to use coal as fuel, but because the steam tank is not from the same mod set as the steam works and rifles and things like that, it doesn't seem to be possible. Nevertheless, though, the steam tank is still cool as shit. I think we're going to do a bit of a weapons test as well. The main cannon of the tank actually has to be pointed at the enemies at all times, as it's not able to move on its own on a swivel. Although, it's pretty powerful. The secondary weapon of the tank is known as a steam turret, and it is just as it sounds, a turret that literally blows scalding hot steam onto its enemies. Now, this episode is pre-recorded ahead of time to come out after the next episode, so I haven't gotten around to naming any of our characters. However, if you would like, you could also provide a name for the tank, and in the next episode, I'll get around to naming everyone and everything. Later into the evening, though, Laz would finally return home from yet another successful trading mission where we made a lot of silver, or at least a lot considering how much we had before. However, nearby scouts from the Black Shogun clan had told us about an upcoming battle in our area. It would seem a good-sized force from the Red Shogun clan and the Neanderthal tribes were about to have a battle. Now, of course, they weren't here to attack us, nor did we really have an interest at first in this battle, but truth be told, I did begin to find interest in it, thinking about who would win, as the Red Clan are better equipped with weapons and armor, but then again the Neanderthals have very thick skulls. I suppose we're about to find out. The two groups would clash in a small valley here between our volcanic erupting hills. To my surprise, the Neanderthals were absolutely tanking several arrows and katana wounds. They were even managing to overwhelm the Red Clan's forces and began pushing them back further into the valley. So much so that at one point the remaining Red Clan members would attempt to flee the area. And we didn't have to get involved, as I mentioned earlier, but I wanted to try out our new steam tank. And this group of Neanderthals all huddled together felt like the perfect target to try it out on, testing their thick skulls against our thick plate armor. And cannon, of course. Many a Red Clan member was still alive after the whole ordeal, but I was hardly interested as none of them really had any good stats that we didn't already have access to, and I knew that we could repurpose their gear and sell it back to the Black Clan, so we stripped them and took it. Now that that's over with, I wish to expand our steampunk technology even further with a personal steam-powered suit, which we would actually end up allowing Laz to try out. You could think of it as something of a prototype. Now, not to worry, he can still wear it with his armor. I've simply taken it off to give you a better look at the suit itself. I should mention though that I was only able to make the two of them wearable at the same time because I edited the apparel layer for the suit itself, which makes sense to me that it would be a skin layer as it is a suit. Now, the suit itself isn't exactly rated for combat, even though, yes, indeed, it does provide 120% protection against sharp damage. It is mostly for day-to-day productive purposes, so as you can see, it also increases mining speed by 20%, construction speed by 10%, and also toxic resistance by 50%. It decreases movement speed a little bit, but it doesn't really matter as this is easily offset by our clockwork exoskeleton. But with that, my friends, I feel like this is the perfect place to leave today's episode as we have made some great strides in our steampunk technology. We've achieved a lot of great milestones in this episode. We've done a lot of new things, and I'm really proud of that. I only want to end the episode here because since it is a pre-recorded episode, I have a really bad fear that Laz is going to die before I get to use any of your great suggestions or names, so I'm going to try to maybe not do so many pre-recorded episodes like this. We'll see. But thank you for watching. I love you. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.